This is Nichol Spohr for Simon Says Stamp with the March edition of Making the Cut. Making the Cut is my monthly series here at Simon Says Stamp where we talk about all things die cutting. If you enjoy die cutting, I highly suggest you like and subscribe. Now let's get to creating this beautiful watercolored sunflower die cut card. We're going to start today with our background panel, which measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And we're going to use the Simon Says Stamp Wood Planks background stamp to create our own pattern paper. This is one of my top favorite background stamps from Simon Says Stamp because it creates beautiful, realistic wood grain paper. Maybe you don't have the wood grain paper in the color that you want. It's so easy to create your own. I love starting by stamping the image with a dye ink on smooth white cardstock. It looks, okay, I guess now, but the magic comes when you take your Distress Oxide inks and ink over this for a beautiful tone-on-tone, real wood looking effect. I personally love gathered twigs and ground espresso. I am kind of applying the gathered twigs more in the center of my panel. I'm using the Gina K blending brushes to do this. I have separate brushes for my dye inks, and then I have brushes that I use with my Distress Oxide inks only. Then we're going to take some of our ground espresso and work that around the edges of the panel, just kind of deepening and darkening those edges a little bit. You can really see those wood planks taking shape the more ink I apply to this panel. Off camera, I did take a dry microfiber cloth and I just kind of buffed this whole thing to remove any ink that maybe was kind of sitting on top. It's not embossed resist or anything like that, so you probably wouldn't have to. I just kind of wanted to buff it a little bit and make sure that anywhere there was a lot of ink that I was just kind of smoothing it out. I don't really know that I needed to do that. Next, I'm going to make sure and clean my work surface. I don't want to get any of that water on my panel. I probably should have moved it further away, but I didn't. And then we are going to start watercoloring some petals. I'm using scraps of Arch's cold press watercolor cardstock, and I die cut the Simon Says Stamp Sunflower Petals Wafer dies pieces from this. And what I'm going to do is color them in with Tombow dual tip pens. I have listed the pen colors and numbers across the top of the screen for easy reference. After I lay down the colors, I am adding a little water with a water brush pen for that watercolored look. I did use some Post-it tape on the back of my watercolor cardstock to hold the dies in place. I found it was easiest to watercolor these pieces when they had a little bit more stability and I could keep my fingers out of the ink. You'll notice that I didn't share the first petals on camera because I didn't love how they turned out. They're probably okay, but they're not my favorite. In fact, these aren't really my favorite either, but I do think I ended up using these. They worked out a little bit better. The blending did. I'm using yellow gold, light orange, and peach here. I know light orange and peach don't sound like they should be sunflower colors, but I really feel like they're a little bit more yellow than peach. Then I want to add a stem for my sunflower. So the sunflower petals doesn't have a stem, but the sunflower stem wafer die had the perfect stem that I could use. So I'm only die cutting the part of the image that is the stem. I don't want the top of this particular flower for my card today. I'm using dark olive and light olive to color that in, and I'm just going to set it aside and let it dry. That's the key here, is I'm letting everything air dry. Now this technique with these particular petals ended up being my favorite. So I'm kind of doing a rounded around the top with yellow gold, using the peach color near the tip, and then blending out with light orange before taking my water brush pen and blending that out. You can see that I'm not spending tons of time being really precise with my coloring. It's more just laying that color down where I want it concentrated and then blending each of those petals out so they have that watercolored look. Imperfection is great here. This is a watercolor type of project, and I love customizing my die cuts with all kinds of coloring mediums, and I really wanted to try these Tombow markers, and I love the result. I added a little bit more greenery in for my stem as well. Now, once I took my die cuts out of the cardstock, I noticed there were a couple areas that I didn't feel get covered very well, and then the sunflower center is way lighter than what I want. So I'm going to watercolor that and just color in the edges, and I'm going to clean off my work surface and let that completely dry, and then we'll come back. Now, Spellbinders actually makes a tool with a foam pad in it. I will be adding that to the supply list underneath the video here on YouTube, but mine is on the way. It isn't here yet, and the foam pad I previously had got ruined, and so I actually had someone mention to me on my personal YouTube channel that you could use the foam pad on the back of the Misty and it's going to work fantastic. So I'm taking the Spellbinders tool-in-one tip, the kind of sharp angled tip here, and I'm drawing lines into each of the petals. And I'm actually not even drawing my own lines per se, because each of the flower petals has some kind of scored lines in them. I'm kind of following those for the most part, and I am going to draw those in, use my tweezers to help hold on to the petal, and bend those flower petals. You can bend them up, you can bend them down. I did kind of a combination. A lot of them are kind of bent up, but some of them I would bend some of the sides the other way, and then I'm gluing them around that outside center. So just one tiny little dab of glue. I want a lot of movement and dimension and texture for my flower petals. I am going around the flower first, and then I will go around again, filling in between each petal. So you can see I did one there on screen. Now that my other flower center is dry, I'm actually taking my markers and adding way more detail in. So I'm going over all those score line details with my darkest markers, and that's going to really help the center of our sunflower. We want it to darken up a little bit, but have enough of that reddish brown undertone that it stands out from the backing piece that we'll be placing this on. After I blended it, I even went back and added a little bit more. The watercolor cardstock is going to hold up fantastic here. And then again, I went around the edges with one of my brown markers. And I'm going to continue adding petals. I will tell you the petal creation here did take a little bit. As far as how many petals I die cut, I did, I believe, 26 petals, which is, I die cut the petals, like all 4 of them, 6 times, and then I die cut 2 more. So 26 total petals all the way around. And I'm using craft tweezers to help hold the petal in place while the glue dries. Because we're bending each of these flower petals, it's a little trickier getting them to stay put. Craft tweezers are my best friend when creating cards, and especially when working with small die cut pieces or even larger die cut pieces. None of these are particularly super small, but they are just so handy. I have a couple of pairs here. But I picked up the Spellbinders, both of the new tweezers from Spellbinders. So when those get here, I am super excited to play with those and let you know what I think. I'm sure they're going to be awesome. I absolutely love the Spellbinders tools. By bending each of these flower petals, they make just so much dimension. It's so awesome. So I'm kind of letting some dry here. I have a couple more petals I need to add, but I'm going to go ahead and glue my gold die cut Big Friend greeting to the white outline while I am waiting for some of the glue to dry on my flower. So I'm just going to line this up here. This is the main part of my sentiment, and then we're going to stamp and emboss the rest of it. I love how that yellow sunflower is looking against the wood plank background. And the friend die is going to fit kind of right here with part of the greenery behind it and part in front. Now I thought it would be super fun to add some sort of a flying critter to my card. I think a bumblebee would be cute if you had a bumblebee instead, or in this case I'm using a butterfly from Hero Arts. This is from the Bouquet Accessories Fancy Dies, one of my favorite die collections from Hero Arts. We're coloring this butterfly in with jet blue, peacock blue, and periwinkle. And my first coloring is way too light, and that's okay. Sometimes I'd rather start too light and have to darken it than get way, way, way too dark and not like the end result. The body of my butterfly and the antennae is going to be in 35 Cool Gray 12. And then I'm just going back in. I did add water to this, but it's drying pretty quickly. And I'm going to go back in and add a lot more of the jet blue coming out from the center, then peacock blue, and finishing with periwinkle at the tips. And then we'll take water to that and blend it out. It's not going to blend quite as much this way, but that's okay. I wanted more definition. I wanted that deeper, darker purple, blue, blue-violet color towards the center. Then I'm going to release that. I don't want the tweezers to make the ink dry weird. I'm going to set that down to completely dry. We're going to put a little liquid glue back behind the stem of our sunflower stem flower, not behind the leaves. That way it gives them some freedom and I can play around with that a little bit. And I'm going to have this positioned right here at the bottom of the panel. Get that right where I want it to go. You can see even part of the flower from the die is left on there, but that's okay because we're going to cover it up with our sunflower petals. Then I'm going to use some tweezers to help me figure out where exactly I want the friend to go. So I don't want it to completely cover up all of the leaves, but I don't want the leaves to completely cover up the sentiment. And I ultimately kind of decided on this because this leaf kind of follows the loop in the top of the letter F, and then the other one is back behind. Anything hanging off the edge will get trimmed off here in a second. We're going to let that dry for a little bit. I've put an acrylic block on top to help hold that down so it dries nice and flat. We're going to stamp a sentiment then from the Simon Says stamp Greetings Mix 2 stamp set. It reads, "Sending you smiles and hugs for today and always." I know I'm doing it upside down. I found it easier to line it up that way since the loops of the letter F were hanging off the side. We're stamping this with a clear embossing ink and then heat embossing with some Simon Says stamp white embossing powder. I like the white on this as I think it stands out really well. It ties in to the white in the background of our big friend greeting. I'm wiping away any excess embossing powder flakes with a dry paintbrush. I'm going to grab my heat tool, which actually was stuck in where I keep it. The cord got stuck, so it took me a minute. I'm going to make sure it's good and warm and then bring it to the paper. Then once the embossing has cooled, I'm going to go ahead and buff away any excess powder sitting on top of that phrase, trim off the loops hanging off the right side of the card, and we can glue our sunflower in place. Now I want my petals to retain that movement and all of that great texture, so I'm only adding liquid adhesive in the center. This is kind of tricky because it doesn't want to stay put. I put this bottle of stamp cleaner on it thinking it would be heavy enough, but I really don't think it is. I ended up grabbing my tweezers because the tweezers just pinch things right there. It was just a little tricky with all those flower petals, but in my opinion, the tweezers work the best. I am going to go ahead and glue my butterfly in place. It's not going to be attached in very many places, but once that glue has dried, it's going to be secure. So I'm just going to put some glue behind the body of the butterfly and then back behind the wings and kind of position it right there on my sunflower. And like I said, I am going to need to grab some tweezers and help hold that in place because my sunflower did move. I thought it was held down and it was secure, but it wasn't. But once I use the tweezers, everything is not moving when the glue is completely dry. I'm going to put the whole panel on a white top fold card base. And there you can see everything moved. And then off camera, I will use my tweezers to help hold that down while I work on the matching envelope. So something I've been doing a lot lately that I think adds so much to a handmade card is making custom envelopes, but I tend to make mine pretty simple. So I am using the Sunflower Background stamp from Simon Says Stamp with Duckling ink, and we are inking the front of the envelope up for a tone on tone. I want something that I can still write over and see very, very easily. Once this dries, it dries really soft and pretty, and I just absolutely love how well it matches our sunflower petals. Isn't that so pretty? On the back flap, then, we're going to take a Sassy Flaps sentiment that says Crafty Goodness Enclosed. And again, we're going to do tone-on-tone stamping with Duckling ink. And that just finishes off the back flap nicely as well. This is a lemon envelope from Simon Says Stamp. They have coordinating envelopes, or a whole rainbow, I guess I should say, of envelopes. And they are absolutely my favorite. They have little pull-off tabs on the adhesive, and they just work fantastic. Here is my finished set. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for making the cut. Please be sure to visit the Simon Says Stamp blog for more information. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.